You know, my neighbor just the other day came out saying the Day of the Dead has arrived, All Souls Day and All Saints Day. Really excited about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it got me thinking, what is the actual story there? So that's what we're digging into today, All Saints Day, Day of the Dead. Let's do a deep dive.
Sounds good. Yeah, we've got this interesting YouTube video transcript that gets into the traditions, and we're also weaving in some thoughts about learning through, news and media like that.
Okay.
The idea is to really get a feel for the cultural weight of these days and maybe uncover some surprising celebrations around the world.
Right. So, first thoughts, Day of the Dead. Maybe just visiting cemeteries, kind of quiet. That did come up in the video source, didn't it?
It did, yeah. That's often the initial picture, remembrance at the graveside. And that's definitely part of it, but it's much bigger than that in a lot of places. The video really highlighted how special it is, particularly in Latin America. Such vibrant, unique stuff.
And it ties into All Saints and All Souls Day too, right? November 1st and 2nd.
Exactly. November 1st honors the saints, known or unknown, and the 2nd is more for praying for all departed souls. But the Day of the Dead, especially the Mexican celebration, kind of blends these and adds its own rich cultural layers.
Okay, so Mexico. The video talked about building altars, personal ones.
Yeah, these private altars, often in homes. They're built to honor family members who've passed on. Really quite detailed.
And they're not just like somber memorials.
No, not always. They often include things the person loved. And our source mentioned sugar skulls, which might sound a bit odd at first.
Sugar skulls, yeah. My first thought was, spooky Halloween stuff.
Right. But the video clarified they're actually these beautifully decorated, colorful things made of sugar, sometimes edible.
Edible skulls. Okay, that's surprising.
It is. The sugar itself, maybe it represents the sweetness of life, perhaps.
Yeah.
And making them is this whole artistic, personal thing, a connection.
So not meant to be scary. More celebratory.
Precisely. And it goes beyond just the visual. They talked about preparing the person's favorite foods, favorite drinks, and taking them to the grave as an offering, as a gift.
Wow. Like sharing a meal symbolically. That's quite poignant. The video also jumped over to the Philippines. Different traditions there, but also really distinct. Cleaning tombs.
Yeah, that physical act of caring for the grave cleaning, even repainting it. It's a very sort of tangible way to show respect, keep that bond.
And lighting candles, flowers. That feels more familiar, maybe.
It does. Those are pretty common expressions of remembrance, across cultures.
But then, this was the part that caught my ear. Whole families camping out in the cemeteries.
Right. Sometimes for a night, maybe 2 nights, right there by the family tombs.
Okay. The video dialogue mentioned that sounding, well, maybe a bit scary or unusual to some.
Understandable, yeah, if it's not your cultural norm. But the video offered that great line, why should we fear the living, not the dead?
Reframing it.
Exactly. It reframes it as this community gathering. Families being together, honoring their ancestors really closely, not about fear at all.
That definitely changes the perspective. Now, the video hinted at why Mexico and the Philippines might have these significant observances. Was it the shared history?
Well, it's interesting to think about what might have been there before, pre-colonial traditions blending in. But a big factor seems to be the shared Catholic heritage. Both countries have really strong Catholic roots.
Ah, okay.
And it's pretty likely that shared background plays a big role in why these days are so important and maybe influences some of the specific ways they're celebrated.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's switch gears slightly. The YouTube source had that language takeaway bit.
Right.
Which ties in nicely with our other source about, how we can learn from this kind of content. So vocabulary, first one. Altar.
An altar. Yeah, the video defined it as basically a special table for religious ceremonies. You see them in churches, obviously. But it also mentioned personal altars, like the Day of the Dead ones, which aren't necessarily in a church setting. They're focal points for offerings, prayers, rituals, been used across cultures forever.
A dedicated spot for remembrance or worship.
Yeah.
Got it. Then deceased and departed.
Right. These are just more formal, maybe more polite ways to say someone has died. The video pointed out you hear them in news reports at funerals. It avoids the sort of bluntness of just saying died, generally seen as more respectful.
Okay, yeah, more formal. And sugar skulls came up again in the language part.
It did. Explained the literal meaning, skulls made of sugar, but also stressed how decorative they are. Not just plain shapes, but really colorful, adorned, edible, unique part of the celebration.
And the last word was tomb.
Simple enough. A place of burial, someone's final resting place. The video connected it to tombstone or gravestone.
The marker on the tomb.
Right. Usually has a name, dates, that sort of thing.
Okay, so useful vocabulary tied right into the culture. Now, the YouTube hosts also kind of compared these traditions to, say, Anglo-Saxon cultures, U.S., England.
Yeah, and that's where you see a real contrast sometimes in how remembrance works. In the U.S., for example, people definitely visit cemeteries, remember loved ones. But it often feels more private, more individual. You have Memorial Day for service members, and then personal anniversaries are often marked quietly within the family.
Yeah, it can be quite introspective, personal. But the video really stressed the difference with Day of the Dead in Mexico, that communal, almost celebratory vibe in the cemeteries.
Exactly. The image of people sharing meals at the gravesite, bringing the deceased favorite food, eating together right there. It's such a powerful picture. It's about remembering and celebrating the life, not just mourning the death.
A really different way to engage with loss and memory. Okay, so we've seen how rich these traditions are. Now, thinking about how we learn about this stuff, our other source talked about news, informative content, helping us understand more, even improve language skills. How does that connect?
Well, absolutely. That text really emphasized vocabulary building.
Yeah.
Right? And we just saw that with words like altar, deceased, tomb. When you encounter words like that in context, talking about a specific culture, they tend to stick better. Their meaning becomes clearer.
And it's not just words, is it? The text also mentioned understanding sentence structure, clear communication.
Exactly. Good news pieces, or like our YouTube source, usually lay things out pretty clearly, structured. Makes it easier to follow the logic, how sentences fit together.
Plus, the text made the point that news stories are often short, focused, so you don't get overwhelmed.
That's a huge plus, yeah. You can learn a lot from manageable chunks.
Yeah.
Videos, short articles, very effective. And the text also encouraged guessing meaning from context.
Oh yeah, such a key skill. You hit a new word about Day of the Dead, but the sentences around it give you clues.
Right. And engaging actively, like we're doing now, helps with actually thinking in the language, as the text said. Thinking critically about what it means culturally.
Asking those what, who, why questions, essential for really getting it. The source also mentions seeing the bigger picture, how cultures connect.
Definitely. Learning about Day of the Dead in Mexico or the traditions in the Philippines, it just opens your eyes to the sheer variety of human experience, how different people approach big things like death, remembrance.
And the text noted how news shows different ways of talking: serious, light, formal. We kind of heard that mix in the YouTube dialogue itself, the different reactions.
We did. You see language adapting, which is so important for really getting a language and the culture behind it. It fosters, as the text said, deeper understanding and feeling, makes learning stick.
It goes beyond just facts, more personal. And these topics, traditions, daily life, culture, that's the kind of everyday language news covers, according to the text.
Exactly. And doing it regularly, that consistency, it builds a habit, builds confidence. The more you expose yourself to these different viewpoints, the more comfortable you get.
For sure. And for listening specifically, the text mentioned hearing, rhythm, tone.
Yeah, even just listening to a discussion like this helps tune your ear to how the language sounds naturally.
And reading transcripts, articles, that reinforces reading comprehension, sentence structure, like the text said. Seeing it written down helps.
And even understanding small bit short pieces, it builds that feeling of, hey, I'm getting this. Boosts confidence.
And ultimately, the text framed it as continuous growth, right? Opening your mind.
Precisely. It's about expanding your world linguistically and culturally. It's an ongoing journey.
Okay, so wrapping up, our deep dive really highlighted how the Day of the Dead, All Saints' Day, these related traditions are just incredibly rich cultural events, so many different expressions, you know, the Mexican altars, the Philippine cemetery gatherings, but all sharing that core purpose, honoring and remembering loved ones in a meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely. And for you listening, as you keep learning, remember that exploring cultures through different sources, a video, an article, whatever, it really does broaden your world, boost your skills. You're not just grabbing facts, you're getting a deeper sense of the human story.
So here's something to maybe chew on. How do other cultures, beyond the ones we touched on, handle death and remembrance? What values shine through in their customs? And what could those different perspectives teach us about life, about connection, even about our own traditions?
That's a great question.
Maybe think about your own family or community traditions. How did they evolve? How are similar customs practiced elsewhere? It's a really fascinating path to explore.